And welcome to this edition of the Exchange Wire Webcast. Today we've got Ben and Johnny from Skyrise Intelligence here on the podcast. You can see that I'm wearing my Mark Zuckerberg hoodie because we're talking about startups, and startups are actually making a big change in the ecosystem post-cookie. So I've done a Daniel Cummings. Is it Dominic? Sorry, not Daniel. It's Dominic Cummings today. My eyesight was all blurry, so I decided to walk to the office, and here I am in the Exchange Wire office. So, gentlemen, I'm going to introduce you. Could you just talk about yourself briefly, and then we'll jump into the conversation?
Sure thing. Thanks, Kieran. I'm Johnny Whitehead, board member at Skyrise Intelligence, and also a company called Regital. I'm working in digital media for the past, 12 or so years, agency side and supply side.
Hi, I'm Ben, also a board member at Skyrise Intelligence and at Regital with Johnny. My background, similarly, we worked together, actually, Johnny and I, going back many, many years in media agency land. And more recently, working for a programmatic marketing business and getting to grips with some pretty cool data sets that we're hoping to take to market.
Thank you, gentlemen. And obviously, we're talking about, how we're going to make data-driven marketing work in a cookieless world, right? And so we've got some excellent companies on the next couple of weeks. And the first up is Skyrise Intelligence. So, gentlemen, let's talk about Skyrise and let's talk a bit about the platform. What is Skyrise Intelligence? It's not obviously a sort of CIA-backed company here. It's ad tech, we must add. So let's talk about the platform and what it is.
Cool. Okay, great. Well, I'll jump in on that. Skyrise Intelligence is we're coining it as a next generation media planning tool, right? So, what we're ultimately doing is harnessing telco data, mobile phone data. That's kind of the core engine, if you like, that powers Skyrise Intelligence. And we think that there's a great opportunity to use that to make campaigns more effective. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the core proposition. And I think, we've come, both Johnny and I, from a media and our programmatic background. We've all been aiming towards a kind of a solution where everything's joined up. We've got a system that can tell us everything about a person, single customer view, all media. And that's just taken a few hits over the last few years with privacy and cookies and walled gardens. And, I think we last year were focusing on programmatic at home and had a bit of a penny drop moment when we thought, actually, we need to be starting to describe audiences differently in terms of both cohorts, because we're talking about one-to-many groups, not one-to-one in that media, but also like, what do they do in the digital world and in the real world? Let's not lose sight of the fact we can be blinded by IDs and smart tactics, but what are people actually doing behavior? So the product in itself harnesses this telco data to build audiences, and then we turn that into targeting segments.
So let's talk about sort of the ingredients for the platform. How do you take that data and make it work for its specific use cases? And we'll go into the use cases in a minute, but I'm just curious, what's the sort of like the backbone of the Skyrise Intelligence platform?
Yeah, sure. So in essence, we have access to anonymized level data within the telcos. Within that information, we have three kind of strands of data that we're able to use to build audiences from. First of all, some demographic information. Second of all, weblog data, so top-level information about sites and apps that are used when devices are connected to cellular connections. And then also passively generated location information as defined by cell tower pings. We're able to then reference that information to build audiences. And because we're not using a cookie or a device ID, we have to find something else that we can buy against. So what we've done is translate these audiences into what we're calling geotemporal segments. So understanding when and where to reach the people you're after based on residential locations and non-residential locations.
Okay. And the use case for the markets, I'd be interested to know how this then can be taken by a buyer, marketer, because I obviously work with marketers and agencies, and sort of the use cases in that respect, how that platform can plug into existing sort of solutions that they have and make campaigns work. Because obviously the biggest problem we've got now is that the demise of the cookie is nigh. It's already not available over one of the most valuable pieces of ecosystem, which is the Apple ecosystem, because all rich people have Apple phones, obviously. But the problem will only intensify when Google drops the hammer on the third party cookie in the coming 12 to 24 months. So we are heading into this new world of fragmentation, right? So we've all these walled gardens. It feels that there's a walled garden popping up every other week. We'll likely have big horizontal plays like Amazon and Facebook and Google, and then you have your offline piece like sort of the out-of-home, digital out-of-home piece, and we'll have CTV. We could even have a Huawei ecosystem potentially when they go their own way in the Chinese market, and it's highly likely. So let's talk about how your platform kind of can help the marketers and the agencies and buyers in general navigate that, what do I call it, the new mess, the messy ecosystem.
Yeah, I guess our platform was designed to be additive to all of that. So it's not linked to any specific activation layer. Really, at its core, the output is a time and a place, and the outputs that we are providing can be formatted to whatever platform you want to buy it to. I mean, we've partnered with some of the kind of best in market, as we see them, activation players, certainly in the UK. But really, the data can be output and used in whatever platform anybody is using. So it's kind of agnostic to that degree.
And are we talking about we talk about like the wider use case for this platform, but it's actually there's an interesting narrative around sort of a mapping consumer behavior, right? Not tracking them or targeting, but actually mapping that consumer behavior across that fragmentation. I mean, that surely is a key sort of area for brands to worry about, given the way we are moving into this messy fragmentation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's a really key point, taking it back to the audience build piece, which I think, as you say, because of the way we sort of approached working with this kind of data, we're talking about really vast data sets, 10, 20 million people. If we start applying consent, layers on that in terms of like opt-in to device level targeting, etc., like you say, the ability to build an audience within what you've got once the consent's been applied is pretty small, right? We want to go back to the source of the data with the telco, and we do this with a really strict privacy framework, as you can imagine. But working within that gives us the ability to give top level view. And like you say, you can be very picky with 20 million people that you see every day, and how you describe that.
What sort of data are we talking about here? Like what specific sort of data? Like so it's all anonymized data clearly, but it can be appended onto. How do you sort of take? I'm just thinking using the platform, but how do you take that specific data points? And I'd be interested to know what data points you have, and sort of use that in a real world example. So you have to take that data and make it work in a targeted point of way. How do you? I'm just curious how that connects into the rest of the ecosystem, because that's one of the things I guess companies like InfoSum are trying to figure out as well, where they're using sort of clean rooms where they can join data using sort of a universal tagging system, and then it's how do you use that data in the real world,
Yeah, sure. I guess so. To kind of reel it back a sec, it's kind of useful to kind of think about the data that we're working within in terms of three layers. Top layer of data exists within the telco's database, their infrastructure, highly sensitive information. Obviously, they require that information in order to provide their service, and that's all user level information that contains all the attributes that I outlined earlier. There's a layer down from that, which is essentially the same data. So it's some demographic in terms of age bands and gender, web logs. So if somebody's visiting dating sites or betting apps or shopping sites or whatever it may be, And then this vast kind of location data set, which is accurate to about 150 meters or 100 meters or something, and continuous. That's all anonymized with an anonymous key, and that's the layer where we work, and that still resides within the telco's infrastructure. No data at any point that is of that type ever leaves the telco. Once we've built an audience based on a brief, so it might be, say, I want to target people who have visited dating apps regularly the past 40 days, whatever. We can then tie that data point to all the data points that we have access to. So where we see the devices, what other sites they visit, what the demographic information is. And then there's a third level of data, which is essentially the insights that we gain from that. So we then turn those that audience into a set of indices based on residential locations and non-residential locations. The residential locations have been grouped using our own location logic to create clusters that account for around about 1,000 individuals, which is again to placate privacy compliancy. And then we were able to then reference those individual clusters based on our targeting criteria. So we can say, right, this cluster here, which of 1,000 individuals, typically about 20 postcodes, that's really rich in people who use dating apps. Not only that, but we can also see that they're at home, Thursday nights, at the weekends, or whatever it may be. We were then able to then translate that into a targeting output through whatever platform you want to buy through. We can also see movement outside of home. So obviously you can see like transport nodes, commuter paths, office, business districts and stuff. And then we cross-reference that with whatever point of interest we need to. Typically, it's the billboard frame IDs and references from the out-of-home industry. So we can then see which billboards are hitting the most of our audience at any time of day, by hour, by day of week. A really good example to kind of crystallize this, we're running a campaign at the moment for a delivery for Subway. So yeah, love a Subway. They're reopening their stores now, which is obviously great and good to see.
I thought they were open. I didn't realize they had to reopen them. I thought they were essential food, essential services,
Yeah, no, unfortunately, they shut down for a bit, and unfortunately, so did our campaign. But it's back up and running now. So what they were launching their partnership with third-party delivery apps prior to lockdown, prior to COVID-19. So what they wanted to do was understand where the people live who are in vicinity of their stores and within delivery radius of their stores who use third-party delivery apps. So we're then able to go into our data set, look for people who use the third-party delivery apps regularly and who also reside within delivery radius of a Subway. We then output the postcodes that are associated to the clusters that we've built and the times of day when those people are most likely to be there for targeting purposes. We also used Bliss location provider to then build like commuter paths from those residential locations as well. So it's a really like top omni-channel holistic view of populations and behaviors built on a very vast data set.
So in that case, which is interesting, there is a utility aspect to it as well, not just like targeting ads. There's actually, you can take the data and actually build business strategy around that. That's important.
Yeah, totally. This data has been used. This is not the first time this data has been used commercially. It's been used in the media, before as well. It's not quite in the same way we're approaching it. But previously, it's been used to, plan where hotels need to be built based on, foot traffic of business travellers, as defined by people who are staying away from their place of residence during the week. Or it's been used to, tell councils where to put tram stops based on the movement of people within cities. Like really, really useful information, and obviously we're applying a media lens to it.
It could be interesting as well for physical stores then, couldn't it? Like, obviously physical stores are closed, most of them at the minute, but when they reopen, it could be quite an interesting tool to use in terms of like, targeting shoppers when they're out and about, or the ability to sort of to get more footfall in stores. It could be quite an interesting tool in that respect.
Yeah, I think so. I think because of the granularity of our location data, and we work with Bliss and other location data providers, you can go tighter than that. Other location data providers are available, but the need to interface our data, and as Johnny said earlier on, it's very much additive to what we're with at the moment. Where obviously we still have cookies that exist, and within declared systems, you're still going to probably have those for a little while longer. So we hope, the ambition here is that what we're bringing is going to enhance. In the subway example, it's going to help us fish in the right areas to begin with before we start applying those kind of extra signals. And for other media and completely anonymous ecosystems, it gives you a really good starting point. Yeah. So it's kind of two sides to it.
And it's kind of, for a while now, we've been trying to reconcile the way digital media campaigns are planned kind of month in, month out, with the way that omni-channel agency planners think, which is kind of differently. It's depending on who you're speaking to, tends to kind of borrow some of the work, Byron Sharp, Ehrenberg Bass, kind of like marketing effectiveness research, which is all about, reaching as many people who possibly be interested in your products as possible, not being, too tied down by niche targeting, and understanding which, channels are best to do that. This really, we think, helps to try and bridge that gap between the language that planners use, then funnel that data-led approach all the way through into the activation channels that we're using, whilst, not taking away any of the functionality that you have within those platforms, be it YouTube, Facebook, or whatever else it is, Trade Desk.
I think, sorry, just add one more thing to that as well. You mentioned earlier on, Kieran, about the new wave of identity solutions that are coming into the market, which I've seen some of them, and I think they're really exciting and really, really interesting in terms of how you could take a brand's first party data or somebody else's and use that on the the activation end. There's no reason why these two things couldn't play together, right? Because you're using that to provide targeting power in the publisher side, if you like, or on the media side. But from an earlier stage, you still need to know where to aim your campaign.
Yeah. There's a question popped up.
There is a question. Yeah, it's to talk about your exclusivity with the data, but I'm more interested in what makes it so special, the special sauce that you have that makes this data work. Because obviously there are a lot of companies out there who are using mobile data. I'm curious to see what's the special, the secret. So obviously you don't have to give me the ingredients of the secret sauce. KFC don't give me the ingredients of their special ingredients for their chicken, tasty chicken it is. Sponsored by KFC, obviously. I'm just curious, how do you make that sort of a unique proposition?
Yeah, I guess the unique thing that we're bringing to market is the perception shift, the mindset shift from one-to-one targeting, which is requires opt-in, requires a device ID or whatever other ID you need, to this kind of localized groups of individuals that is anonymized and aggregated to the degree that you don't need an opt-in in order to be GDPR compliant. And then the other kind of element to it that really is that we built, Alex Petrie, the data scientist we work with, has built, is this location and behavior understanding, which translates the raw data that we have access to with the telcos into meaningful insights, behavioral insights, robust audiences that we can then buy against, and then measure the behavior of afterwards.
I'm just curious though. I mean, you're talking to quite a lot of agencies, a lot of marketers. So I want to talk about how they're viewing this change in the ecosystem, because it's kind of I want just to shift the conversation to the general conversation, because it's really important.
Yeah.
Are they ready themselves for a cookieless world? Are they prepared for this, or is it sort of business as usual for a lot of them, and they haven't done the proper sort of groundwork? Because I get the sense that there are a lot of agencies out there that have their heads in the sand regarding this and said, look, Google's given us a year and a half. But when you talk to marketers and agencies out there, are you seeing a different sort of approach?
That's a good question. I mean, the agency, I can tell you that the clients we speak to, and certainly the clients and also most of the agencies we speak to, have been very welcoming of our solution. I know that they're probably they're working behind the scenes in order to figure out what's not going to be viable. Come Chrome deprecating the cookie. I think that's really been the focus, and I think obviously the work that's done by the IAB, released a couple of weeks ago, helped to crystallize that in a lot of people's minds.
What was that? The IAB report, or
yeah, just a kind of like post cookie era piece of work that was a list of contributors there.
Yeah,
and it was just very good in terms of technically laying out what the issues are and really clearly stating what's not going to be available, moving forward. But I think because my experience is that most businesses that you speak to, they're heavily reliant on the Facebook stack and the Facebook platform, and also
and probably more so. There's probably more money going in there, given that it does work.
Exactly, yeah, all that, and also YouTube and everything like that. And so I think the core really of what they do probably isn't going to change too drastically. It's really the agencies, I think, in the trading desk who are putting more focus on what the solutions are going to be.
Does it force? Do you think it forces agencies and buyers to think more omni-channel? Because obviously that war has been thrown around quite liberally over the last couple of years. But do you think this disappearance of third-party cookies is going to force more progressive thinking about omni-channel buying? I'm curious to know if that's something that's popped into, because you obviously alluded to that, Johnny, a few minutes ago, around the omni-channel buyers. But we all know, we're grown-ups here, that a lot of the activation within the agencies is very much siloed. Like, you have search and you have social, you have programmatic, even though programmatic is a channel, I have no idea why. But you have this silo effect. Do you think something like this speeds up the consolidation of a lot of that activity within the agencies, particularly the holding groups and independent agencies, and even the big marketers themselves?
Well, yeah, I hope so. And I think a key driver of that is going to be the metrics that people use to judge the success of a campaign. Without some of the cookie-based metrics that we currently use in digital, focus is going to be drawn towards the metrics that have always been used to measure offline media success. So things like quality of media that you're buying, making sure you're hitting the right audience. And really taking more of a holistic approach to campaign success rather than counting individual cookie files. So I mean, hopefully that's what I hope will happen. But I guess we'll see.
If I was Ben, if I was a buyer now, I'd be kicking your door down for the digital out of home piece and the mobile location piece. It just feels to me they're like low hanging fruit to start with. I mean, obviously there's other areas that you can back, but it feels that these are multi-million billion-pound industries that could be easily enhanced by using something like this.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, that kind of ties back to where we first started with the product, if you like, and it's not gone away. If anything, right now, it's more important than ever. And yeah, we're in talks with, I guess, everybody across the board on that front. But yeah, to the point before, I think like a normalization of trying to make everything data driven, in a kind of more equal way is going to mean that we're going to take a a broader view of everything at the same time, right? Rather than like having some elements over here that we can go right down to this kind of military grade targeting of people wherever they are, and over here just having a panel that tells you roughly speaking where people go. Something that we can draw these two things together. That's what we kind of hope Skyrise Intelligence can do, is sort of normalize those two aspects. I'm sure within the agency there's going to be more consolidation of roles. There's going to be more consolidation of departments. So the need to have some sort of single approach, at least initially, would help.
Sorry, Johnny, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, the out-of-home industry are kind of extremely interested. A few different reasons. First of all, our ability.
So many reasons, Johnny. So many reasons. Oh,
I'll tell you a bit about why we're different. I jumped off. Basically, we can describe audiences in ways that people have been wanting to do for a long time, and you just can't do without a vast sample and a really broad and connected data set. Also, we can understand movement based by hour. So this is something which is not currently possible, although I believe obviously other players of the market are kind of working towards that, based on the fact you can buy media, out-of-home media, programmatically by the hour. But prior to Skyrise, there are no measurement solutions which go down to that granularity. And also there's a measurement aspect as well. So we can, because our data set is persistent over time, we can understand what the impact of a campaign has been on things like site traffic, app usage, switch between sites that belong in the same competitor set, that sort of thing. So yeah, a lot of exciting uses in that space.
Yeah, I thought measurement was particularly some of those other mediums would be a sweet spot for being able to kind of talk about the efficacy of the campaign as you ran.
Yeah. I mean, obviously at an omnichannel level as well, because it's seeing what's happening on the device rather than tying it back to an individual ad impression. And that's something that we're in development of, and we're working with a set of open-minded, collaborative clients on a beta test around that.
All right, around the measurement piece.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a couple of questions here about pricing. I think you need to email Johnny and Ben directly with that. That's not a question for the webcast, although maybe a future event we can talk about. Just sort of thinking about the marketer before we finish. What would you sort of give? How would you advise them to kind of navigate this? Obviously, you want to use Skyrise Intelligence, right? But how would you say they should navigate this sort of fragmented space in the coming years? Because at the minute, right, we've got the Chrome sort of oxygen still pumping into the room, but when that goes, what happens next? So, how would you advise agencies and marketers? What should we do now to sort of to make themselves ready for that eventuality?
Yeah, I mean, well, at the risk of kind of repeating what the people were saying in market, I think there's two kind of areas of focus that most clients we speak to are looking at. First of all, is really getting a handle on first-party data, and becoming more direct to client is part of that. Really understanding who your audiences are and how you can best utilize that first-party data through the channels that are still going to be open to you, whether that be email, whether that be Facebook, or using some of the functionalities like Ads Data Hub, or some of the great companies that are in this space at the moment, InfoSum, and others. And then the other side of things, looking at larger anonymous data sets that are coming into market, like Skyrise, that will help to scale and really help you to understand that audience that is not yet known to you.
Good stuff. Just one last question, Ben. I'll give it to you because it's just somebody here. Actually, I think we've already covered it, but we'll answer this and then we'll finish up. But somebody here, actually, Rob Linton. Rob, how are you? He's asked, can this data be applied across channels that perhaps have previously sat in great silos, such as Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube?
In theory, yeah. it all depends. I mean, as with all of these different partners, they have their own ways of applying location. So we need to get under the skin of how and where we target, and it's not going to be right for every campaign. But yeah, provided we can pick a place and a time, and the audience is compelling enough within that particular place, then yeah, there's no reason why we can't overlay it in that way.
Okay. I think that's it. We've got a few more questions, but they're more technical and price related, which is good. That's good for Skyrise Intelligence. Obviously, people are interested in using your product. If you have those questions, Ben and Johnny are available to talk more about that. Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for being on the Exchange World webcast today. And we'll see you again in the near future, and hopefully the product will be sort of used by a lot of people.
Thanks, Kieran.
Great, thanks for having us.
Have a good day. Cheers.